Chapter 1. The Return of the Guardians. The hum of the Ascendant's engines reverberated through Naomi Oren's bones, grounding her in the present. Yet her mind kept wandering back to the past, her childhood on Earth, before humanity reached for the stars. She could still remember the day her family was lost, the haunting silence that followed the catastrophic breach in their colony, the silence of a home left abandoned. That memory was her driving force, the one constant that had kept her moving forward, even when the mission seemed hopeless. Now, in command of a ship with the most advanced technology humanity had ever created, Naomi had but one purpose: find the Guardians before the celestial Vanguard did. The Guardians weren't just myth. They were ancient beings of immense power, capable of saving humanity or destroying it. A sudden beeping sound interrupted her thoughts, bringing her back to reality. Lieutenant Caden's voice crackled through the comms. "Captain, we've arrived at Athelion." Naomi straightened in her chair, her hands gripping the console with quiet resolve. She looked out the viewport, her gaze locking onto the desolate, storm-swept planet below. The ruins on Athelion were old, older than any known civilization in the galaxy. Its surface was a graveyard of forgotten empires, and its secrets had remained buried for centuries. If the Guardians still existed, they would be here. She stood, adjusting her uniform. "Prepare the landing teams. We need to be quick. The Vanguard fleet is closing in on our location." Caden's voice came back, tinged with concern. "Captain, we're reading something unusual in the planet's core. It's pulsating like it's alive." Naomi's heart skipped a beat. Could it be them? Could the Guardians be awakening? "I'm not sure, Captain. The readings are inconsistent. They're unlike anything we've seen before. Keep monitoring. We're not leaving until we know what's down there." Naomi left the bridge, walking briskly toward the docking bay where the landing party was preparing. Her steps were steady, but beneath the surface, anxiety clawed at her. What if they weren't ready for what they might find? What if the Guardians were more than humanity could handle? Inside the bay, her team was gathered, each one preparing for the treacherous descent to Athelion surface. Naomi addressed them, her voice firm but measured. "This isn't just another mission. We're not only securing ancient technology, we're safeguarding the future of humanity. Stay sharp, stay together." They nodded in unison, their expressions unreadable, but Naomi could see the nervous energy in their eyes. She trusted them with her life, and soon she would need that trust more than ever. As the Ascendant descended into Athelion's atmosphere, the planet's surface became a blur of gray mountains and churning clouds. The ship shuddered as it fought against violent winds, but Naomi remained calm, her hands steady on the controls. She could feel the weight of her crew's hopes pressing down on her, but she didn't let it show. They landed with a soft thud on a rocky plateau, the ship's hull glowing faintly against the planet's cold, barren surface. Naomi led the landing team out of the airlock, her boots crunching against the loose stone as they made their way toward the ancient ruins. The air was thin here, and the constant storm made it nearly impossible to hear anything beyond the howling wind. "Stay close," Naomi ordered. "We don't know what we're dealing with down here." As they neared the ruins, the oppressive atmosphere grew heavier, thick with the weight of history. The structures, towering stone obelisks and intricate carvings, seemed almost alive, their surfaces etched with symbols Naomi couldn't decipher. Her lead archaeologist, Dr. Mila Sorrento, knelt down beside one of the obelisks. "Captain, look at this." Her voice was filled with awe, but Naomi could hear the strain in her words. "This is no human technology. This is something older, something alien." Naomi stepped forward, peering down at the symbols. "What are they saying?" Dr. Sorrento shook her head. "It's too complex. But one thing is clear. The Guardians were no mere myth. They were real." Before Naomi could respond, a deep rumble shook the ground beneath their feet. The team fell silent, eyes wide in alarm. The tremor was followed by a strange, pulsing light emanating from beneath the ruins, growing brighter with each passing second. "It's them," Naomi whispered to herself. "The Guardians. They were awakening. But even as Naomi felt a surge of hope, a cold dread washed over her. The signal, the pulse, wasn't just a beacon. It was a warning. The ground trembled again, this time violently, and a low, guttural hum reverberated through the air. "Captain, we've got incoming." Caden's voice crackled over her comms. Naomi's heart sank. The Vanguard. She raced toward the ship, her boots pounding against the rocky ground. She could see the sleek, menacing warships of the Celestial Vanguard descending from the dark clouds above. Their blackened hulls gleamed in the dim light, their cannons already charged, ready to fire. "Get to the ship now," Naomi shouted, turning to her team. As they sprinted back to the Ascendant, Naomi's mind raced. She had to protect the Guardians. But how? Could she trust them? And if they were truly as powerful as the legends said, would they be the salvation of humanity or its destruction? The team reached the ship, but Naomi hesitated for a moment, glancing back at the ruins one last time. She felt an overwhelming sense of urgency. They couldn't let the Vanguard seize this power. Not now, not ever. Inside the ship, the crew was already preparing for battle. "Captain," Caden called, his voice strained, "we can't hold them off for long. Their fleet is massive." Naomi's jaw clenched. "We don't need to hold them off. We need to outsmart them." She slammed her hand on the console. "Prepare to engage the Vanguard. But our real target is the Guardian energy core. If we can tap into that power, we might stand a chance." The Ascendant's engines roared to life, lifting off from the planet's surface. Naomi's gaze never left the viewfinder, her eyes locked on the Vanguard fleet, now circling around them like vultures. And beneath the stormy skies of Ethelion, the ancient Guardians stirred. The battle for humanity's future had begun. The Ascendant tore through Ethelion's upper atmosphere, its engines roaring as it outpaced the descending Vanguard fleet. Naomi's mind raced, but her focus remained unwavering. The Guardians' energy core was their only hope. The Vanguard knew it, too, and they were not going to let it slip through their fingers. "Captain, the Vanguard fleet is tightening their formation." Caden's voice crackled over the comms. "They've locked onto our position. We'll be under fire in less than 2 minutes." Naomi gritted her teeth. She could already feel the weight of the decision bearing down on her. Each second brought them closer to a point of no return. The Vanguard would stop at nothing to control the Guardian's power. But Naomi couldn't let that happen. Not after everything humanity had been through. "Get the shields up," Naomi ordered. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers." Her fingers danced across the control panel, her eyes scanning the holographic map of the Vanguard fleet now encircling the Ascendant. Their ships were swift and precise, practically surgical in their tactics. But Naomi had something they didn't, the element of surprise. With a sharp motion, she pulled the ship into a sudden barrel roll, narrowly avoiding a direct hit from a barrage of plasma fire. The Ascendant shuddered violently, but the shields held. "Report," Naomi barked. "We're intact, but they've tagged us with a tracking device," Caden replied, his voice tight. "They'll be on us in seconds." "Then we need to make sure they can't follow us," Naomi said, her tone colder than the void of space itself. "Prepare to initiate the quantum jump. Set the coordinates to the coordinates of the energy core. We'll slip past them." There was a pause, and Naomi could hear the rapid typing of commands as Caden and his team worked furiously. The quantum jump was risky, especially with the Vanguard so close, but it was their only shot. As the countdown on the display hit 0, Naomi braced herself. "Initiate jump." The stars outside the viewport blurred into streaks of light as the Ascendant's engines surged into overdrive. With a deafening hum, the ship shot through the fabric of space, its trajectory locking onto the coordinates embedded in the ruins beneath Ethelion. Time seemed to stretch and bend as the ship catapulted forward, the walls vibrating from the force of the jump. Then, as quickly as it had begun, the stars snapped back into place, and the ship emerged in a remote, undiscovered part of Ethelion's orbit. Naomi exhaled sharply, the weight of the jump lifting as they came to a sudden halt. The Vanguard fleet was nowhere to be seen. "We've made it," Caden said, his voice sounding both relieved and exhausted. For the first time in hours, Naomi allowed herself a brief moment of calm. The Vanguard was temporarily out of the picture, but the real battle was still ahead. "Status report, everyone," Naomi said, turning back to her team. "Energy readings are off the charts," Dr. Mila Sorrento said from her station. "We're detecting a large, concentrated source of power underneath the surface. It's not just alien, it's something more, something ancient." Naomi nodded grimly. This was it. They had found the source. "Prepare a landing party," Naomi ordered. "We're going in." Minutes later, Naomi stood in the ship's cargo bay, her crew ready for the descent. There was no turning back now. As the airlock opened, a wave of frigid air hit her, the smell of something old, something almost alive, seeping through the cracks. The ruins stretched out before them, a network of immense stone structures etched with symbols Naomi had never seen. The architecture was alien in the most unsettling way, as if it belonged to a civilization that had long since transcended time. "This place feels wrong," Caden muttered under his breath. "Like it's been waiting for something." Naomi didn't answer. She was too focused on the task at hand. They moved swiftly, boots crunching against the stone, each step echoing in the oppressive silence. The wind howled around them, but beneath the surface there was a deep, rhythmic thrum, almost as if the ground itself was alive. "Stay alert," Naomi said, her voice low. "We're walking into something we don't fully understand." The energy readings were becoming more erratic, the pulses growing stronger the closer they got to the heart of the ruins. Naomi's mind raced. What if the Guardians didn't want to be found? What if awakening them meant awakening something far darker? Dr. Sorrento's voice interrupted her thoughts. "Captain, over here. This structure, it's different. It's pulsing with energy." Naomi's heart skipped a beat. She moved quickly toward Dr. Sorrento, who was crouched by a large, circular formation carved into the rock. The symbol at its center matched one of the designs they'd seen earlier, an intricate, spiraling pattern, glowing faintly in the dim light. Naomi could feel the energy emanating from it, hot and intense. "This is it," Naomi whispered. "The core, the energy source." As they gathered around the structure, a low hum filled the air. The ground beneath them seemed to vibrate with increasing intensity, as if the entire ruin was awakening. A series of cracks appeared along the edges of the circle, and then, without warning, the ground split open. Naomi staggered back as an immense pillar of light shot upward, bathing them in a blinding glow. In the center of the light, she saw it, an ancient figure encased in a shimmering energy field. It was tall, humanoid in shape, but its features were otherworldly, too perfect to be real. "The Guardian." A voice, deep and resonant, boomed in her mind. "You have awoken us." Naomi's breath caught in her throat. This was no ordinary discovery. The Guardians were alive, and they had questions, dangerous questions. The figure's eyes opened, glowing with a fierce, unnatural light. "You seek power, human?" Naomi steeled herself. "We seek survival. The Vanguard, they'll destroy us if we don't have the power to fight back. We need your help." The Guardian's gaze fixed on her, unwavering and ancient. "And what makes you think you deserve such power?" Before Naomi could respond, the ground rumbled violently, as if the planet itself was rejecting their presence. The Vanguard hadn't been far behind. They were closing in on the core. The Guardian's voice resonated again, louder this time. "Astra's survival comes with a price, Captain Oren. Are you prepared to pay it?" Asterisk. Naomi's mind raced. There was no choice. "Do whatever it takes," she said, her voice steady, but her heart pounding. "We have no time left." The Guardian's gaze bore into Naomi like a cold wind, its piercing eyes glowing with an intensity that made her blood run cold. For a moment, she thought it might just end right there. The Guardian was ancient, powerful beyond her comprehension. But then the voice came again, deep, resonant, and undeniable. "The price of power is not always what you expect." Naomi's stomach twisted. There was no time for hesitation. She couldn't let the Vanguard take control of the core. and she couldn't let the Guardian slip away back into the depths of its forgotten prison. Not when humanity's future was at stake. "We don't have the luxury of time," Naomi said, her voice steady but urgent. She stepped closer to the Guardian, her hands clenched at her sides. "The Vanguard is coming. If we don't act now, everything is lost. Please, we need your help." The Guardian's presence seemed to ripple with energy, as if considering her words. "Help? For what purpose?" "The Vanguard will use the power of this core to dominate everything," Naomi said. "They want to control the galaxy, crush the human race under their heel. We've fought for this long, fought to survive, but we can't do it alone anymore. We need the power to fight back, to stand chance." The Guardian was silent for a long moment, the only sound the hum of the core. Then, with an eerie fluidity, the figure stepped forward, its form still glowing with radiant energy. "Survival or destruction?" The Guardian's voice echoed inside Naomi's mind. "This is the question you must answer, Captain Orin." Naomi swallowed hard. The words reverberated in her skull, weighing on her, but she stood firm. She couldn't afford to back down now. "Survival," she said, her voice a quiet promise. "We fight for survival. We won't become another casualty of a war we didn't choose." The ground trembled beneath them, a reminder of the Vanguard's relentless pursuit. Naomi didn't have much time to second-guess herself. "Then you must be willing to sacrifice," the Guardian intoned, its voice turning darker, more foreboding. There are no gifts in the universe without consequence. There is no such thing as free power. What you seek, you will pay for with blood, with soul, with everything you are. The air thickened with tension, and Naomi felt the weight of those words pressed down on her. Could she truly shoulder the burden of whatever the Guardian might demand? Was this her moment to claim a future, or would this be the point where everything crumbled? She knew there was no turning back. "I understand," Naomi said, her voice unwavering. "Whatever the cost, we'll face it. Just give us the power we need to fight back." The Guardian's eyes flashed with an ancient, calculating light. "Very well, Captain. Your determination will be your guide, but not your salvation. Suddenly, the world around Naomi seemed to distort. The ground beneath her feet cracked, and the sky overhead twisted in on itself. The energy of the core surged like a violent storm, whipping up tendrils of raw power that reached out like living things. Naomi instinctively reached for her crew, her eyes wide in alarm. "Caden, Dr. Sorrento, get back," she shouted, but her words were swallowed by the growing roar of the energy field. The core itself was alive, its power feeding on the air around them, drawing them closer to its heart. Naomi felt her skin tingle, her pulse racing, as the air became thick with an otherworldly force. In a single, swift movement, the Guardian raised its arm, and a flash of light erupted from its hand. Naomi gasped as the light struck her, her body jolting with an overwhelming surge of power. It was like being struck by lightning, but there was no pain. Instead, she felt herself expand, her mind reaching out, touching the very fabric of the universe. For a brief, impossible moment, Naomi saw beyond the stars. She saw the ancient wars, the forgotten civilizations, and the threads of fate that bound all things together. The Guardian's power was not just a weapon. It was an experience, a transformation that bled through time and space. Her body trembled as the force of the core's power coursed through her, but she stood her ground, focusing on the purpose that had brought her here. They needed this power. Humanity needed it. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the energy burst stopped. Naomi collapsed to her knees, gasping for breath. She felt as if every cell in her body had been stretched, twisted, and reformed. The power was inside her now, surging through her like fire. The Guardian's voice sounded again, but this time it was softer, almost as if it were pitying her. You now hold the power of the Guardians, Captain Orin. But know this, the power you've taken has already begun to take hold of you. The price has been paid, Naomi blinked, trying to steady herself. Her vision was blurry, and her head felt heavy. It was as if her entire existence had been altered. But she couldn't afford to dwell on the feeling. Not yet. The Vanguard were still out there, still coming for them. "We have the power," Naomi whispered to herself, as much to reassure herself as to confirm it. "Now we fight." She rose to her feet, her movements slower than usual, but her resolve was sharper than ever. Her crew was watching her, their faces a mixture of awe and concern. "I've got the power," Naomi said, her voice gaining strength with each word. "Now we have a chance." But just as Naomi turned to lead her team toward the exit, a chilling noise rumbled through the ruins. It was the unmistakable hum of engines, the Vanguard. They had arrived. "Captain," Caden shouted, panic rising in his voice. "They're here." Naomi's heart skipped a beat, but she didn't hesitate. "We're not running," she said firmly. "Get ready to fight. All of you." The Ascendant was their only weapon, and the power from the Guardians surged within Naomi now, raw, untamed. She felt it coursing through her veins, flooding her senses with the promise of victory, but also with the shadow of the cost. She was ready. They had to be. As the Vanguard ships loomed overhead, the fate of humanity and the galaxy hung in the balance. The battle for survival had begun. The Vanguard's fleet filled the sky, dark, ominous, and unyielding. Their ships were sleek, shaped like jagged blades, cutting through the atmosphere with deadly precision. Naomi stood at the bridge of the Ascendant, staring through the viewport, her gaze fixed on the approaching armada. The energy from the Guardians still pulsed inside her, a strange, burning presence that made her feel both invincible and vulnerable. "We don't have much time, Captain," Caden's voice snapped her out of her trance. He was at the communications panel, his brow furrowed in concentration. "The Vanguard's fighters are locking onto our position. They know we're here." Naomi clenched her fists, her body still buzzing from the raw power that flowed through her. "How long until they make contact?" she asked, her voice steady but taut with anticipation. 5 minutes, max," Caden answered, turning to meet her gaze. His eyes were wide with urgency. "We need to launch now if we have any hope of surviving this." Naomi nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. The stakes had never been higher. She had the power to fight, to win, but the weight of that power pressed on her, heavier with each passing second. The Guardian's warning echoed in her mind. The price has been paid. "Get the crew to their stations," Naomi ordered, turning toward the command console. "We'll need everything we've got to take them down." Dr. Sorrento, the ship's engineer, hurried across the bridge, her usually calm demeanor replaced with quiet determination. "Captain, we've done everything we can to prepare the ship," she said, voice tight with tension. "The core's power is fully charged. But I need to warn you, the energy output is unstable. We might not be able to control it once we engage." Naomi's eyes narrowed. "Unstable?" she asked, her tone low. Sorrento nodded, her face pale. "The Guardian's power, it's unlike anything we've ever encountered. If we're not careful, we could overload the system." Naomi thought for a moment, her mind racing. Overload? It was a risk they couldn't afford, but if they didn't use the core's full power, they might not survive the Vanguard assault. It was a choice between survival and destruction, a line she had no choice but to walk. "We take that risk," Naomi said firmly. "If we don't hit them hard now, we won't have a chance later." The decision was made. The crew scattered to their posts, preparing for the inevitable. Naomi's hands gripped the command console tightly, her knuckles turning white. She could feel the pulse of the core, its energy thrumming through the ship like a second heartbeat. "Vanguard fleet in range," Caden called out, his voice edged with alarm. "Weapons are locked. They're firing." Naomi watched in horror as the first wave of Vanguard missiles streaked toward them, leaving a trail of fire in their wake. She didn't flinch. She couldn't afford to. She tapped a few controls on the console, activating the ship's defensive shields. "Deploy countermeasures," Naomi barked. A series of bright, flashing lights erupted from the Ascendant's hull as drones and electromagnetic pulses shot into the air, creating a web of interference that slowed the enemy's missile barrage. Some of the missiles veered off course, but others closed in. A massive explosion rocked the ship, sending Naomi stumbling as the lights flickered and alarms blared. Shields holding at 50%, Sorrento called from the engineering station, her voice strained. "But if we take another hit like that—" "I know," Naomi interrupted, her focus narrowing to the battlefield. "We don't have the luxury of waiting. Fire everything we've got." The Ascendant shuddered again as it unleashed its full offensive. The Corps' energy flooded into the weapon systems, the cannons on the hull glowing bright with raw power. Beams of concentrated light tore through the dark expanse, striking the Vanguard ships with explosive force. They retaliated, returning fire with brutal efficiency, but Naomi's crew fought with everything they had. For a moment, it felt as though the universe had slowed. Her heartbeat, the ship's pulse, the burning beams of light that slashed through the sky. Naomi felt the Guardian's power within her, filling her with clarity, with purpose. But she also felt the price of that power, the weight of it dragging her down, threatening to overwhelm her. She focused on the battle. She couldn't afford to lose herself in the feeling. "Not now. Target their flagship," Naomi ordered. "Take down the command center. We cut off the head, we cut off the army." Caden's hands flew over the controls, and a moment later, the Ascendant's weapons shifted, locking onto the Vanguard flagship. Naomi could see it in the distance, a massive ship, almost twice the size of the Ascendant. Its hull gleamed under the fire from both sides, almost mocking their efforts. "Firing!" Caden shouted, his eyes locked on the targeting grid. A torrent of energy shot from the Ascendant's cannons, slamming into the flagship's shields. The impact rocked the vessel, and for a moment, Naomi thought they might have done it. But the Vanguard flagship wasn't so easily defeated. The shields flared brightly, holding firm against the barrage. "Shields are holding," Sorrento reported, "but just barely. One more hit like that. We won't get another chance," Naomi muttered under her breath. Her mind raced as she weighed their options. If they couldn't break the flagship's shields, they'd lose the battle before it had even begun. The Vanguard were relentless, and if the flagship remained intact, they'd soon find themselves outnumbered and overwhelmed. "Raise the core output to maximum," Naomi ordered, her voice cold and unwavering. Sorrento's eyes widened in shock. "Captain, if we do that—" "We don't have a choice," Naomi snapped. "We do this, or we die." Without another word, Sorrento adjusted the core's settings, her hands shaking as she made the final calculation. The ship groaned under the strain as the core's power surged, flooding every system with unmatched energy. The Ascendant shook violently, and Naomi felt the power surge through her once more, almost unbearable this time. She pushed it down, focused on the task at hand. "Firing," Caden said, his voice steady despite the chaos. The beam shot forward, brighter than any before. It tore through the Vanguard flagship's shields, breaking them apart like glass. But it didn't stop there. The beam continued, piercing the flagship's hull, exploding outward with such force that the enemy ship seemed to shudder in space. The Vanguard flagship's main engines erupted in a spectacular fireball, disintegrating in a flash of light. A collective cheer erupted on the bridge, but Naomi remained silent, her mind already shifting to the next phase of the fight. The battle wasn't over. The Vanguard had been crippled, but they were still coming. "We've won the first round," Naomi said, her voice steady. "But we're not done yet. Let's finish this." And with that, the Ascendant plunged deeper into the fray. Chapter 5: The smoke of battle still hung thick in the void, drifting slowly through the wreckage of the Vanguard's fleet. Naomi stood on the bridge of the Ascendant, eyes fixed on the stars ahead, her mind processing the chaos they had just survived. The initial victory had come at a steep cost, but they were still alive, still standing. Her fingers tapped lightly against the console. The core's energy was still unstable, pulsing erratically beneath the ship's hull. The price of using its full potential was beginning to show, but Naomi pushed the thought aside. There were more pressing matters at hand. "Status report," Naomi said, her voice sharp as she turned toward Caden, who was scanning the sensor readouts with intensity. He looked up, brow furrowed. "We've taken heavy damage, Captain. Shields are down to 30%, and our main weapons are offline. The core's energy is rapidly depleting, too." Naomi exhaled, her gaze sweeping across the silent bridge. "Can we make it to the nearest outpost for repairs?" Caden hesitated. "The closest station is 6 days away, if we push the engines. But we'll be vulnerable. We can't outrun any further attacks." Naomi nodded, considering the situation. 6 days. That was a lifetime in this corner of the galaxy, especially with the Vanguard fleet no longer a distant threat. They were relentless. If they didn't get their ship repaired soon, they'd be easy pickings. "We don't have 6 days," she said quietly. "We need to find a way to re-engage, even if it's just for long enough to make it to safety." At that, Sorrento, the ship's chief engineer, approached, wiping the sweat from her brow. She had been working nonstop since the battle began, and Naomi could see the fatigue weighing on her. "I think I have a solution," Sorrento said, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. "The core's energy is running low, but I can reroute the auxiliary power to the primary systems. It won't give us full capacity, but it'll be enough to hold off any incoming attacks long enough for us to make it to the station." Naomi turned toward her, intrigued. "How long will that last?" 2, maybe 3 days. "If we're lucky," Sorrento answered, her gaze not meeting Naomi's. "But after that, we'll be out of options. The core won't be able to keep us running." Naomi weighed the options. 2 days. It was a tight window, but it was better than nothing. She needed those 2 days to get them to safety, to regroup, and to repair the Ascendant before the Vanguard found them again. "Do it," Naomi said, her voice firm. "Get us moving." Sorrento didn't hesitate. She moved quickly, her fingers flying over the console as she rerouted power, bypassing several internal systems to prioritize the ship's core and engines. Naomi could hear the hum of the ship's systems shifting beneath her feet. It was a temporary fix, but it would have to do. "Engines are online," Caden reported. "We're moving." Naomi nodded, relieved. She turned to look out at the stars, her thoughts heavy. The battle had been hard fought, but it had only just begun. The Vanguard had been dealt a blow, but they were still out there, still hunting. She knew it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The Ascendant lurched as it slowly gained speed, creeping forward through the debris of the battlefield. Naomi's thoughts wandered to the crew. They had survived the battle, but they had also lost much. Many of the ships they had fought alongside were gone, destroyed in the massive conflict. Their allies had been decimated. "How many ships are left, Caden?" Naomi asked, turning back to him. She needed to know the full extent of the damage. "Only a handful," Caden replied, his voice low. "Most of our fleet is gone. The Vanguard hit us harder than we anticipated. We'll need more than just repairs to survive the next encounter." Naomi felt a cold knot settle in her stomach. The odds were against them, but she refused to let it break her resolve. They had fought too hard to give up now. She glanced at Caden, then Sorrento, who were both still focused on their respective tasks. The crew was still working, still pushing forward, even in the face of overwhelming odds. "We'll make it through this," Naomi said, though she wasn't sure if it was for them or for herself. She needed the reminder. Sorrento shot her a look, as if sensing the doubt in Naomi's words. "We will," she said simply. "We're not done yet." A sharp ping from the sensor array interrupted their conversation. Caden's fingers flew over the console, his eyes widening as he processed the incoming data. "Captain, we've got something coming in fast," Caden warned. "It's too small to be a full Vanguard ship, but it's closing in on our position." Naomi's stomach dropped. The Vanguard had reinforcements. They weren't finished with the Ascendant just yet. "Can you identify it?" Naomi asked, her voice tight. Caden glanced at the readout again. "It's a fighter, fast, heavily armed. Looks like a scout ship." Naomi cursed under her breath. The Ascendant might be able to survive a direct confrontation with a larger fleet, but a single fighter could slip past their defenses easily. "Engage evasive maneuvers," Naomi barked. "We can't let it get a lock on us." The ship rocked as the fighter unleashed a barrage of missiles. Naomi gripped the railing beside her, her knuckles white as the Ascendant swerved violently, narrowly avoiding the explosion of a missile that impacted the space where they had just been. "Countermeasures," she ordered, her voice low and steady. Sorrento's hands flew over the engineering console as she activated the ship's automated countermeasures. A barrage of flares and electromagnetic pulses shot from the Ascendant, creating a cloud of interference. For a moment, Naomi hoped it would be enough. The fighter's missiles veered off course, exploding harmlessly into the distance. But the fighter itself remained on their tail, dodging the ship's evasive maneuvers with ease. "Engage weapons," Naomi snapped. "Take it down." Caden's fingers flew over the controls again, his eyes flashing with determination. Weapons charging, firing. The Ascendant's cannons roared to life, unleashing a concentrated beam of energy that cut through the void, tearing the fighter apart in a brilliant flash. The threat was gone, but the battle was far from over. Naomi let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding, but she didn't allow herself to relax. There was too much at stake. They had to make it to the outpost. They had to survive. And with that thought in her mind, Naomi turned her gaze back to the stars, her resolve harder than ever. She wasn't going to let her crew fall. Not today. Not ever.